Hello and welcome to another standard gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we're taking a look at a Bant Beanstalk control deck. This list is based on the deck that performed well in the hands of Greg Orange in the World Championships. I've made a few changes to the main deck since we're playing best of one. I've included 2 copies of Sunset Revelry to give us a bit more life gain and additional 1/1 blockers against those aggressive decks which are quite popular, but otherwise the game plan is very much the same. Up the Beanstalk is the main card draw engine in this deck, a 2-mana enchantment. When it enters and whenever we cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, we get to draw a card. So Up the Beanstalk synergizes incredibly well with Leyline Binding, even if we cast Binding for 1 mana, which is possible in this deck thanks to all the tri-lands, which give us additional basic land types. We're able to exile an opposing non-land permanent and still draw a card with every Up the Beanstalk we have in play, so that's an amazing combo. And then we also have 3 copies of the new Horned Lochwhale. Can first use the Lagoon Breach Adventure for 1 and a blue, and then the owner of target attacking creature we don't control puts it on the top or bottom of their library, and then eventually we can cast the 6-mana 6/6 at instant speed. It has Ward 2, does enter the battlefield tapped, so we won't be ambushing any opposing attackers with it, but the opponent will often see it in exile anyway thanks to the adventure. And then we've got some more expensive cards in the form of Sunfall as our sweeper of choice, exiling all creatures and letting us incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. That also gives us a potential win condition alongside the whale, and then additional win conditions include our Wandering Emperor, making 2/2 Samurai tokens, of course a great removal as well, especially against those aggressive red decks, where we get to exile a tapped creature and gain 2 life. And then another win condition comes from Mirex in our mana base that can pump out additional 1/1 tokens. And then the rest of the deck is all interaction to keep up with the opponent's game plan. We've got a few counter spells. Syncopate especially, also quite nice with Up the Beanstalk if we cast it for X equals 4 or more to counter an opposing spell, exiling it in the process. And then we also have 1 Negate and 2 copies of Make Disappear to round out our counters. And then 2 copies of March of Otherworldly Light, which we can also potentially draw a card with if we cast it for X equals 4 or more. And we can always overpay for these X spells, even if we're trying to exile a 2-drop, we can always pay X equals 4, and then we can also deal with creature lands using our March of Otherworldly Light, which is pretty nice, also an answer to enchantments. And then we also have 4 copies of Lay Down Arms as more cheap spot removal, especially useful to deal with creatures like Thalia, making our non-creature spells more expensive, as we can still pay 2 mana total to answer it. And we do need to have enough planes to enable Lay Down Arms, so that's why we see 6 planes, as well as all the tri-lands which have the planes type, which will not only power up Leyline Binding, but also enable our Lay Down Arms. And then we also have 1 Memory Deluge, which can be cast for 4 mana and then flashed back for 7. Now do keep in mind, if we flash it back, it still counts as a 4 mana card for Up the Beanstalk, so it doesn't draw an extra card there, but still nice to have a bit of instant speed card draw to go with our other instant speed plays. And then a mana base, as we mentioned, plenty of planes, a few additional blue-green lands to go with the planes to fix for other colors, and then the channel lands also offer additional utility, Boseiju dealing with creature lands or enchantments, good Soaring City to bounce stuff, and then Iganjo to deal 4 damage to attacking or blocking creatures. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, missing blue mana. Is this still a keep? I think so. We've got enough interaction here that we should be able to keep up until we find our blue mana. And then hopefully we can find our Up the Beanstalk. Definitely start by playing a plains. Alright, seem to be up against a red aggro. So our 2 white removal spells will come in handy. We'll have to take a hit from the Scoundrel, since I don't want to pitch a card to the March. Alright, so just go tapped lands, Lay Down Arms, and then we can potentially exile whatever 3-drop they play next. Godric. Alright, Emperor's nice. Could main phase it to exile Godric, but let's just pass, keep our options open. Opponent channeling Crucible to make a pair of 1/1s, which will also trigger Celebration, that's nice. But yeah, let's get rid of their 4/4. And then by making a 2/2 blocker, we can maybe hold off the tokens. Rafine's Tower enables a cheap Leyline Binding. Although we can expect a burn spell to clear the samurai. Don't have blue mana up to counter, so that happens. Yeah, the 1/1s are gonna pack at our life total. Could use removal now, maybe a march for x equals 0. Since the damage is gonna add up over time, don't have a sweeper in hand. And then we'll keep Leyline Binding for something scarier. Alright, could lay down arms here. Think we wait. Opponent might have a handful of burn spells. A Lightning Strike, yeah, let's just counter that now. Syncopate is getting worse over time, still have a Binding, which should be able to answer most of the opponent's threats. And then we'll need a second blue source to be able to play the whale. The adventure deals with the token. And yeah, if we can find a beanstalk, double binding represents 2 more cards. Could see the opponents kill their own token in response just to deny me having access to the creature half of my adventure. But then they also have fewer burn spells to close out the game. They're definitely considering it. But they let it go. Okay, take our turn, Sunfall. Not necessary. So we still need an extra blue source to close out the game, but then we can potentially kill the opponent in just a couple attacks. Another Lightning Strike, yeah, that's adding up. Glad I got to counter that first one. We've got creatures covered, but burn spells can still get us. Might have to lay down arms my own whale here in a second. Alright, gotta go for it. And there's Up the Beanstalk, perfect. Draw a card, hope to find a counter, Syncopate. All their opponents got a lot of lands in place, so they might be able to pay for Syncopate here. Don't think I'm late on armsing my own whale, at least not yet. It's gonna be Godric, that's fine. Godric attacks, we bind it, and we draw a card. And now with Syncopate up, I feel a lot safer. And we'll also be able to draw off Syncopate thanks to our Beanstalk. So we need 2 more turns with the whale. And a Twisted Fealty to try and steal it, interesting. So let's let them pay for it first. And then we have to Syncopate, otherwise we're gonna have to exile our own whale, which doesn't seem all that great. So x equals 4. And then we still have Leyline Binding up, we get to draw with Up the Beanstalk, find another binding. Could just cycle it here just to draw a card. Don't hate it. Find an Emperor. Alright, so now we've got a bit more life gain potentially, negate. Alright, I think we're in the clear. Pass it back. And our opponent explodes. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's pretty slow to get going. But yeah, at least we're on the play, which makes up for it a little bit. And we've got plenty of planes for late on arms. And then Up the Beanstalk can help us take over the late game. Opponent black-green. So we'll have to decide if we want to keep up Syncopate to counter a potential 3-drop here. Opponent Sultai Colors. And Summon a Phage milling themselves. Okay, so it's a self-mill deck. That's nice. Late on Arms still works on a very large Summon a Phage. So I think I'm okay tapping out for Up the Beanstalk. There's no 3-drop I'm too scared of here. And then next turn we can keep up our Wandering Emperor, also a nice answer to some large Somnophages or Lurgoyfs. It's going to be a Lurgoyf with 1 kicker, milling 3 cards. And yeah, let's just pass. Somnophage to mill. Tyvar can also get back their various 2-drops. Lurgoyf attacks, play Emperor, and that resolves. They can still play a Somnophage, which we can lay on arms. And then cast Deluge. And then we should be in pretty good shape, especially if we can find some expensive cards to draw with our Beanstalk. Virtue or Token. Yeah, I could counter that now, or I could wait to counter the 7 mana Virtue, which is probably better. And then we get to Deluge in the meantime, or we can counter Tyvar, which is also pretty effective here as a Planeswalker that will stick around. Alright, so we could be in a bit of trouble now if our opponent does have 7 mana to cast Virtue and we don't find a counterspell in the meantime. Although Binding also a nice answer now, so I'm less concerned. I guess we don't have a second blue source yet for Deluge, which I hadn't noticed. So yeah, I guess good thing we countered. So pass a turn. I would like to keep Binding to answer Virtue. And Dread Knight's a good one too. But we have multiple ways to exile it, so it's not going to be coming back. So opponent does not have a 6th land yet, so I think I'm justified in playing a Leyline Binding then to draw. Could also go Emperor, make a token, next turn lay down arms, the Somnophage, keep up Binding. That's also reasonable. We have to watch out for the Cottage, which Binding cannot exile. So maybe there was a reason to still hang on to our Emperor. Alright, now the Whale's a better answer. So we'll make another token. I'll lay down the Somnophage. Attack for 2. And yeah, hope to find another blue source to cast Deluge. Opponent up to 6 mana. And it's going to be another Virtue on the token. Sure. And a Dread Knight. And a Somnophage. So yeah, I don't think I can afford to waste my Leyline Binding on a creature. Revelry makes a pair of 1/1s, gains 4 life. That's good enough for now. And then I could grow a human, so we have multiple things that can trade for Dread Knight, although we don't really want to trade for Dread Knight if we can help it. Finding a Sunfall would also be nice. And we've got Binding for Virtue. So Trump Somnophage, and then probably just double block the Dread Knights, and then we'll see if they want to go for their 7 mana enchantment, or if they replay the Dread Knight right now. Could also bounce one of their creatures. Yeah, I suppose that's an option. I'm less worried about the Cottage right now. When our opponent's got double Virtue they can cast. And then I need Binding to find me another counter or another Binding. Alright, that's fine. Found our second blue source, that's the start. And now we can exile Somnophage. Have to play Headquarters, since I also can't play the whale right now. So yeah, a turn where we don't get to do anything, sadly. There's Virtue, so Deluge hoping to find another binding, although now we also have Boseiju as an answer. I think we main phase Deluge, see if we find binding first, since Boseiju could also be an answer to the cottage. Find Whale and Soaring City. Okay. So yeah, just gonna have to attack and Boseiju the Virtue. Now if we flashback Deluge, it's still a 4-mana card, so it doesn't actually draw with Up the Beanstalk. Opponent adventuring the Dread Knight, so they could still play it and animate Cottage at the very least. They're looking at the graveyard for a back for seconds. Okay, so they're gonna try and sacrifice something to the Spider to destroy Leyline Binding, I'm sure. So that's a concern. Let's read Spider carefully. Yeah, I guess we could bounce their token in response, forcing them to sacrifice Old Rutstein instead. Doesn't seem all that amazing. I think we'd rather cast a Deluge and then maybe find another answer to the Virtue of Persistence. And then could attack with both, because if they double block, at least they don't have a 1/1 token to sacrifice. Opponent has 29 cards remaining, so decking them is still pretty far from a win condition. Our opponent could also just trade here, then play the Dread Knight, sacrifice Dread Knight to the Spider. That's fine by me. And then if we can find something like Sunfall, we can clear the board, exiling creatures in the process, and then play our whales afterwards to try and close out the game. So it's going to be a Spider for now. Sack a token, destroy Leyline Binding. And we can't keep that in play, otherwise we're in trouble. Tortoise is very good too, so all the more reason to try and find Sunfall. Opponent got back a Vinestalk, so plenty of creature lands we have to find through as well. And we did find Sunfall, and probably an Up the Beanstalk here. Could also March to exile the Virtue of Persistence. I guess that's an answer, sort of. Sure. Alright, we found a Leyline Binding, that's a cleaner solution. So now I regret not getting another Beanstalk, but there it is. And then now we've got a large token to block their creature lands as well. But yeah, hopefully we can find Sunfall and maybe an answer to the Virtue. Our opponent's looking at their creature lands. So next turn we can play a whale, draw 2 cards, and then still adventure another one. Although March is also an answer here, X equals 0, gets rid of the cottage, can exile creatures with it, so... I guess I should wait for them to attack. I don't care about them exiling a card as much, but if I exile the cottage, they could animate another creature land in response. So we'll let that go. Sunfall exiled. And then before taking damage, we'll exile the cottage. So 1 card in hand, a Dread Knight they can play, and 2 creature lands is what we need to deal with. But I'm liking our chances. Ooh, Old Stick Fingers is a good one. At 10-10. Drew another Sunfall, that's a good solution. Also exiles a Dread Knight so it doesn't keep coming back, since otherwise I could just chum block or whale over and over. Get to draw 2. And find another answer to a creature land. So we can start beating down. Abandon Mire, get back something from the graveyard. 17 cards remaining. What's the best they can do? Maybe a Planeswalker here, get back another creature. Or Spider, but they don't have anything to sacrifice. Since it's only creatures, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, so they can't sacrifice a food token, for instance, to destroy the Leyline Binding. So maybe Tyvar, get back a 2-drop is best here. If they cast Tyvar, can only syncopate for X equals 2. Opponent goes for Lurgoyf. Still can't counter even if they fully kick it. But we can march it. Opponent leaving up 4 mana, doesn't really do anything. So yeah, I don't mind clearing a path, and then we can put our opponent to 1. Could also wait to march for more than X equals 2 to potentially draw with Up the Beanstalk. But we're not short on 5+ mana cards. Opponent does still have a food token they can sacrifice. But now our shield's up on Syncopate. And if we don't need to counter anything, we can play our whale. And just a land for turn. So yeah, it's looking good for us. Draw 2 more. This is not optional, so it is possible that we end up decking if we draw too many cards, but hasn't been a problem so far. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and is decent. Bit light on the planes for late on arms. Turn 1 initiate, so Revelry can stall for time, and that will set up our Sunfall nicely. Thalia is still a concern, and that is a reason to play a plane, so if I draw another one we can at least late on arms Thalia. I guess that's worth it. Could also exile the initiate, but not in a hurry. And yeah, there's Thalia, so I don't have a second planes yet for late on arms. So in that case, I guess I could play tapped Cascade. Alright, opponent does nothing, stuck on 2 lanes. So now I can syncopate for 1. Could also Revelry, which will buy more time, but if our opponent's got something like an Adeline, that's probably worth countering. Take 4. Since I'm not sure yet that I'll be able to cast a Sunfall in time, now I've got a second planes, I could lay on arms Thalia, and then next turn cast Sunfall. Opponent probably has a second Thalia in hand, given that they haven't done much so far. Virtue of Loyalty, making a 2/2. Fair enough. Officers next. And that's it. Okay, so do we Revelry or do we Sunfall is the question. Since I have another late on arms, I can answer another 2-drop, but not a 3-drop. But the board is getting pretty scary, so I think I have to pull the trigger here. And then one turn where opponent gets to resolve something powerful, and there's Adeline. But I found another planes, so now we can lay on arms and go shields up on Syncopate. Do I want to Revelry first is the question. Revelry would not let me draw a card yet, but I would get 2 tokens and gain 4. Unlikely to draw me a card later. Could also lay on arms and then Revelry. And then I don't get the tokens, but I do get to draw a card, which is maybe better at this point. And then I'll still have Syncopate for 1, as well as Animate Incubator available. Mirrex gives us another mana sink. Skrelv we cannot counter. Luckily the incubator is colorless, so it's not the easiest for Skrelv to get past. And then sure we'll play the Mirex and attack. I'll wait on Revelry until we also get to make the 2/1/1s. Adversary, yeah, counter unless they pay 3. And that's it. So I may not get my tokens here with Revelry, could get my card and 4 life. But now we've got the whale as a nice alternative. Yeah, maybe just getting the card while we can is fine. Okay. A Vanguard, I think, is acceptable. Doesn't pump Skrelv, doesn't block my 3/3. Want to keep Syncopate for the Virtue of Loyalty, perhaps. And then for now I can play the whale to turn the corner. Up the Beanstalk would be a nice draw. A Leyline Binding, also pretty versatile. But we'll have to answer Skrelv first. And then now we can activate Mirex. Ossification. Okay, I guess we can Leyline Binding the Ossification, make them pay for ward. And then get back our whale. Can Binding at instant speed. Although the whale will still enter tapped, so won't be able to ambush anything. But maybe our opponent makes a mistake of activating Skrelv here. Alright, they don't. Take 2. And then with the token we can put our opponent to 1. Wouldn't be needing Sunfall. So yeah, it's possible that I should not have animated my incubator token when I did, and instead wait to make the tokens with Revelry and then animate it, since those 1/1s could have made a pretty big difference. But yeah, it still worked out. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, missing green mana for Up the Beanstalk. Can I keep? It's pretty greedy, but we do have a Revelry to kind of catch back up. Just need 1 green source, and then we also get a bigger discount on Leyline Binding, which is awesome with Beanstalk. Alright, let's keep it. Do not try this at home. Turn 1 Swamp, Evolved Sleeper. Okay, at least I get to draw a card here with Revelry. Make 2 1/1s, no life gain, but that's okay. Still on the search for a forest, basically. I'll take a land drop for the turn. And then could lay down arms. We've got Binding, hopefully, for larger creatures. And then now we can start attacking. Opponent was going to level up Evolved Sleeper anyway. Alright, go for the throw at my token, don't mind if I do. So we can deduce that their hand has a lot of removal if they're willing to take out a 1/1. Syncopate we can keep up. My Kingdom for a forest. Many of our green sources will enter tapped, so it's still going to be another turn before we can cast our Beanstalk. Duress. Yeah, that's pretty effective. Can't Syncopate successfully, so they can take away Syncopate. Can't cast any other spells, so... But yeah, if we find our forests, our opponent's in trouble. Take Syncopate. Animate Foundry, so they can't attack with a sleeper now. And still nothing. Well, I may as well attack since I'm unlikely to hold off Evolve Sleeper here. Is it time for Shieldred? Nope, just a Foundry attack. And Sleeper can level up. Take 4. And March can exile either Sleeper or Foundry. I guess could still attack here. Sleeper, now a 3/3. Could start drawing cards. Alright, in that case, we'll get rid of it. Alright, there we go, our green mana. Can cast a 3-mana Binding, but ideally we can play our Beanstalk first. If our opponent plays a Shieldred, I'll probably have to get rid of it before we draw. Phyrexian Obliterator, pretty big. And a Foundry attacks. Alright, let's just Binding then. Play Beanstalk. Can still use our Whale. And now a 2-mana Binding as well. But yeah, Whale's probably better against a creature land. And then we'll have a 6-drop to draw 2 more cards. Unless they want to destroy their own Foundry here. Go for the throat my 1/1 once again. Foundry on top. And this looks okay, maybe tap this one. Oh yes. Who needs Syncopate when you can draw a ton of cards? Another Mishra's Foundry, opponent passes, and now we're in full control. With 2 counterspells in hand, plenty of removal. A Whale can be flashed in. I'll take 2. And then wait to play our Whale end of turn. Once we know that we don't need to counter anything. If we Syncopate for at least X equals 4, we also get to draw with Beanstalk. So it was a bit of a sketchy keep, admittedly, but this is the payoff right here. I'm sure they can deal with the Whale. A 3rd go for the throat. So now decking might be a concern all of a sudden. Don't think I want a main phase Wandering Emperor. Can discard to hand size, maybe Jetmir's Garden. Boseiju can deal with the Foundry. Could have main phased that, I suppose. But may need to keep up a counter spell or 2. Could use Emperor to exile it. And then still have Make Disappear available at the very least. Yeah, I don't hate that. Could also make a token to try and block Foundry as opposed to exiling it. But they probably have more spot removal to clear my Samurai. Shieldred's Edict deals with my Planeswalker. Yeah, that happens. They can pay for Make Disappear. Take our turn. Can always use Binding as a 2-mana draw 3 at any point. I'll play Boseiju, we can use the extra mana. Yeah, just waiting for opponent to put something on the stack. Shieldred's a good one. So Syncopate X equals 4, so we get to draw 3. And that's why this deck likes Syncopate more than Make Disappear. Just need to find another Emperor, Whale, or Mirex, can also help close out the game. Alright, found both. So do we main phase an Emperor, make a Samurai? Then I wouldn't be able to play the Whale. So discard a Late on Arms here. Yeah, our opponent must be holding more removal. They're not doing much. So I'll play the Whale. Draw 3 more cards. We might get to a point where we want to protect our Whale from removal as opposed to just letting it go. But for now, we can't quite counter with Make Disappear. So that works. 27 cards remaining, so still a long way to go before we end up decking. Now I'm considering a main phase Emperor, make a token.
We must protect the people.
Cut down's fine. Only gonna find over removal that deals with my Emperor. And then another Late on Arms, probably the pick here. Could also ditch one Make Disappear. Opponent's got nothing. That's fine. I think we actually play this as a land drop as opposed to cycling it. I'm gonna be excited if our opponent plays a creature at this point. Could always use Binding as a draw 3 effect, but just gonna apply a bit of pressure with the Samurai.
Strike fast and strike hard.
Might have wanted to cast Revelry before attacking, so we gained 4 life. But yeah, that's about it. Just discard it to hand size, keep up all my mana. Tenacious Underdog, finally. So how do we want to deal with it? A March could be a decent answer, or we can just go for Binding, so we get to draw a few more cards. And a Gix's Commands. Alright, so that's definitely not resolving. 2 counters, sacrifice creature with highest power. Now let's Make Disappear that one. Keep Syncopate for later. And then a Leyline Binding seems fine. Draw 3. And our opponent has seen enough. Finally, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. We've got our Beanstalk to draw extra cards, plenty of interaction, so it's just about surviving and leveraging the card advantage from our enchantment. Could also wait to cast Up the Beanstalk, keep up Syncopate on turn 2. That's going to depend on the matchup. Yeah, against the red aggro deck, probably better to keep up our interaction early on. Can also exile their 1-drop. Crasher. Yeah, let's just counter that. So Crasher kind of implies that our opponent's playing some pump effects and maybe other ways to synergize with Scamp. Now, probably okay to tap out for Up the Beanstalk, play a tap land, and then next turn have Wandering Emperor available. So our opponent can hit us with whatever 3-drop they have. Ancestral Anger makes sense. And another Crasher. Okay. So we just get to keep up 4 mana. Either Deluge or Emperor. Now we also have a few more options with the Whale. Could Whale Crasher and then use March on the Scamp. but casting a 4-drop is probably going to work out better. Another Ancestral Anger. Well, now going for March, x=1 denies the card draw, which is probably worth it. And then we'll use the Whale on Crasher. Monstrous Rage, that's fine. If our opponent's got a double strike effect, they could try and go for lethal here. Hammerhand. Yeah, this is a very aggressive mono-red deck, not the usual burn kind. But yeah, there's no protection spell I'm worried about. And our opponent explodes. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is missing a few colors, but honestly, this isn't the worst. We've got plenty of cheap interaction with double laydown arms, and then if we do find green mana, we're off to the races. Can play Otawara next turn to keep up Syncopate. Opponent potentially on Esper Legends, so would love to counter Rafine here. It's going to be a Danik, which plays around Syncopates, but we can exile it with a laydown arms. Yeah, that's fine. Also means they wouldn't be getting it back unless they cut it down in response here. And then we can still Syncopate the Shieldred on curve. Now they could maybe resolve Rafine. Yeah, let's counter here. Could also wait to use the Whale, but then we might fall behind if our opponent then resolves something scary. Alright, just waiting for green mana now. Four mana, still nothing. Binding, we cannot cast yet. So finding any tri-land here would be great. Wandering Emperor's pretty annoying. So now they do get to resolve something else if they want to. One more planes and we can lay down arms as Shieldred. It's going to be a Fairy Mastermind. So that's pretty easy to get rid of, and we found our green mana. Okay, so step one, a lay down arms. And then play Up the Beanstalk. And another green source ready to go. Still only planes for Leyline Binding, so we'd love to find a tri-land. There we go. Okay, and then pass it back. Plenty of answers in hand. And more card advantage here as soon as we cast our Leyline Binding. I think I'll hang on to the Garden just to provide an extra basic land type for binding. And then a Blitzed Underdog. Not a bad target for binding, could also use the Whale. And then binding can be a more flexible answer for, let's say, another Planeswalker. Opponent could kill their own Underdog just to fizzle the adventure half, but they do not. Okay. Play and pass. Now we can play our Whale, draw 2 cards. And our opponent has seen enough, yeah, Up the Beanstalk is gonna take over here. Alright, so we get to see this Bant Beanstalk deck in action, and the Beanstalks definitely delivered whenever we got to see them in action. Very nice alongside our Leyline Binding and other X spells that can often draw us extra cards as well. Now the mana base in this deck is a little bit sketchy, so sometimes you will lose a game or two to an aggressive deck if you stumble on mana. Since the mana base is trying to do a lot of different things, we need to have enough planes to enable laydown arms, we need to have our double white in time, double blue sometimes as well. So again, it's a bit of a sketchy mana base, but whenever it works out, it's definitely one of the most powerful decks in Standard. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.